Welcome to NETIV. If you have a chance, please do me a big favor and subscribe and like the video. It really helps us a lot with the overall, I'm going to use a fancy word I learned from Timothy, algorithm. So maybe I actually felt a little bit more intelligent saying the word algorithm. So I might have to include it several times during during anyway, I won't do that. Let's go to the Parsha, Mishpatim. Exodus 21, 1 starts off very, let me pull up my text here, very straightforward. It says, "These are the rules that you shall set before them." Now, the Talmud talks about, what was being said at this moment was that a teacher must give reasons for his or her teaching. Part of the learning is to understand why you're learning these things. I think sometimes in school, I know with myself and with other people, you grow up thinking, what do I need algebra for? Or what do I need this advanced geometry for? Whatever. You would think, when am I ever going to use it? And for most people don't use it. But the point would be is it would make it a lot easier if teachers can learn how to encourage their students by giving them a reason why they're learning. So it's pretty important. Now this parsha is the 18th week of the Torah portion as we go along. And if we're following Torah portion, if you're first time hearing this, a Torah portion is actually a section of chapters within the Torah, the text, that is examined by all of the Jewish world in their synagogues and in their weekly devotion, prayer, and study, the Parsha. So this week we open up Parsha Mishpatim. Now this, as I said earlier, is found in Exodus 21:1 through 24:18. And the Parsha primarily focuses on laws and social regulations, continuing a narrative after this really dramatic event of giving of Torah at Mount Sinai from the previous Parsha in Yitro. Now, when we go through this, and it's only going to be brief that I'm going to be given this overview, I would like for you to peruse through the first few verses or even the first couple of chapters while I'm giving this overview. And I want you to find the Sheva Mitzvot within the text. Now, what do I mean by that? You're literally not going to hear something that says, and this is the sixth Sheva Mitzvot. You're not going to hear that. But we've often intimated and taught the reason why that the B'nai Noach needs to study the Torah, and that is the first 5 books of Moses. And when we say Torah, we would also include the commentaries, et cetera, the oral Torah, but more specifically, the written Torah. Now, the oral Torah gives us better explanation, but we often encourage people that are studying text outside of the regular written Torah, the first 5 books of Moses, be actually learned through a proper rabbi so that you can get a better understanding. Now, the central theme of Mishpatim revolves around civil and ethical laws that guide our personal relationship between man and man. Now, we understand that the 10 Commandments, for example, are separated into 2 categories. One is man toward God, how you should conduct yourself, and the other is man toward man, how you conduct yourself in compassion toward other people. Now, the Parsha begins with laws concerning the Hebrew slave. Now, we don't have slaves anymore. This is different in this time, not that I'm justifying slavery, but slavery during this period of time was more about employment. People indentured themselves for their own prosperity. But this specifically has to do with the Hebrew slave. That means that a person who has become someone's slave. Now, there would be a couple of issues why they would become a slave. And it was not about them going on a slave market or being taken as a slave. This is a Hebrew who, by all means and methods, um, have found themselves in a difficult situation, either by the court because of property damage or theft or damages toward another person's physical being. All of these are important parts of the Hebrew law. And because there wasn't prisons, then justice was meted out by reparations or damages, etc. So that meant that if you couldn't pay the person that you had damaged their property, either by theft or damages or injury, then there would be a financial way for you to relieve yourself of that burden by either indenturing yourself to someone else or making the deal with the actual person that you committed the damages toward. Now, I find it interesting what a way to look at justice in a society that says that the person that did the greatest injustice to you, theft or damages or whatever, that person has to work for you for a period of time to pay back the debt. To be honest with you, I think that would be the best way for justice to be meted out. Now, only in the past, say, 35, 40 years, have we seen the development within our justice system of victims' rights courts or victim courts, where victims can come in and sue for damages. Often they don't get hardly anything. And if they do, it's just a pittance from donations from the state that provides grants or whatever to victims of crime. But could you imagine a person that commits a crime or does a damage has to live with that family while they're paying back the damages? This would highlight this idea of judgment being a very practical aspect of social governance. Though I think in this country and most countries, we try to do a good job. Could you imagine what will happen whenever we're back into a period of time in which the Torah is the ruling document for all of society? I think they would find that very interesting. Now, let's look at some key topics within Mishpatim. First, I mentioned the laws of slavery and servitude. This is the guidelines for a Hebrew slave, including being released after 6 years of service and provisions for their freedom, meaning that when a person went and indentured themselves to work for another person, well, their in servitude couldn't last more than 6 years. And now there's a side commentary to this that I believe that Mike brought up in last class, and that was, what about the person that has the awe put, a nail put through their ear on a doorpost if they don't want to gain their freedom after 6 years? There's a whole set of judgments based on that, but we won't focus on that right now. Next is the resolution of criminal law, punishment for actions such as murder, assault, theft, and damages. Then there is property right regulations, which we have in our own society, ownership of a property, theft of a property, restitution that is based on the theft of the property or destruction of the property. Next is social justice is dealt with here. The instructions to care for the vulnerable in society, the what do you call it, the stranger in society, the widows, the orphan, the poor, to ensure really a fairness in the legal system so that no one goes without their basic sustenance in life. Next is the sabbatical year, and the sabbatical day is both emphasized in this text. The sanctity of the Sabbath and the agricultural Sabbath year for land's rest and debts are forgiven. Huge thing. Not only does the land rest from its growing cycle and can replenish itself, but also mankind has a way to settle or have their debts forgiven, which is an amazing concept that we don't have in our modern day society. At the conclusion of the Parsha, the Israelites affirmed their commitment and covenant with God by an agreement to follow his commandments. You will say it and we will do it. Now, this culminates in the sealing of the book of the covenant at the foot of Mount Sinai, where Moses had come up and then come back down, where Moses sprinkles the blood of animal sacrifices on the people and the altar, symbolizing the binding agreement between them and God. Now, the chapter ends with a vision of Moses and the elders of Israel seeing a divine manifestation on the mountain, underscoring a sacred relationship between God and his people. It wasn't with all the nations. Now, it says generally there is the commentary that says that Torah was given to all the nations, but they rejected it. I don't understand what that means or how that works out in a proper sense, but the nations nevertheless did not take up the mantle of Torah. The Jewish people did. Overall, Mishpatim blends the legal, ethical, and spiritual principles, really laying down a foundation for a just and compassionate society governed by divine laws. Now, with that being said, we also understand that the Sheva Mitzvot provide the nations with a contract with the creator of the universe that says that if we will follow these things, we will become a just and pure society. And as you can well see, we are probably far from being that just and fair society. But I do believe that we've come a long ways in the world that we live compared to what it was just 200 years ago. Think about where we've come as a society, but we have so much further to go. And I think it's a positive thing to know that we're on the path for full redemption, that God willing will come soon to our aid.